think kids are always interested in speed. I was particularly interested because my father often picked me up at school in Little Alpha, and my mother being in competitions, you know, doing hill climbs and that sort of thing. And so I suppose I enjoyed that sort of thing. And I had a Morgan three-wheeler until my father took it away from me.
Didn't you turn that over at one stage?
It turned me over. No, I had a flat back, honestly. No, my excuse is like back flat tire on a Morgan is more serious than an ordinary car because it wiggled like this and then went up a bank and fell over. And I had some ferrets with me at the time. And I remember, I got to open the box and this ferret's face came out quite all right, but he got oil on it. And I thought, but having had the Morgan, then my father found that I'd ordered a racing car. This is when I was 16. He said, what is this? I told him, I said, it's a deposit on a racing car, £50. So he said, no son of mine's going to be a racing driver. So he said, and what's more, you're going to go back and ride a bicycle, which was a hell of a come down. And
Can I interrupt you? Why do you think he said that, Stirling? Because he raced himself.
Because I think he knew the dangers of it, he knew the cost of it as well. And he said, you know, this is just not on. It's a rich man's sport, and really and truly you're not making any money at all yet, so you can't do it. And it took a lot of massaging my father for quite a while. He said that after a while, he said I could drive his 328 BMW in sprints, which was rather boring, but I used to, you know, he'd come along with me and then I'd massage him, and one day we came back for our Cooper car company. And, you know, I saw the Cooper, I said, gosh, look at that car. We went in and thank God Charlie Cooper, John's father, had been at Brooklands and my father knew him. And so they started to talk and how this car had come about, how he'd taken two Fiat 500s and stuck them together. And ultimately, my father let me buy one. And so I did buy one. I sold my father all the stuff I didn't need, like my bicycle, my radio, and all the things I didn't need, all that crap. And then he let me buy it, and we took the horse box, which was one of those four-wheel jobs with a divider. And we took the divider out and we could get the 500, the Cooper inside it. So we went off with the family. So it was really a family thing.
Was there a point at which you felt that your father had recognised that you got something special and changed his mind about the whole thing?
Yeah, I went to my father. I'd done pretty well in hill climbs because remember that we're talking now just after the war, so there was insufficient petrol to be racing. And I'd done pretty well at hill climbs. And then John Heath, who owned HWMs or made HWMs, came along and said, would I drive for a year with him? And I went to Dad and said, look, Dad, can I have a year off? Because at that time, my father made me, if I was going to take time off to do hill climbs, I'd have to work during the week to make up the hours. And I was in the hotel trade. And so he said, well, all right, you can have 1 year to try and see if you can do it, which I think was, he had felt, I think, that because I'd done well on hills, I'd won quite a few of them, that, okay, it's fair to give him a go. And I think that was the breakthrough, really. Yeah, I suppose it must have been. And that was, of course, with John Heath, who then built these cars called an HWM, which was Hersham Walton Motors. And there were bits of this and bits of that. And we went abroad and raced most weeks at different circuits, Aix-les-Bains and Périgueux and you know, Bari in Italy. And we went round from one race to another with John Heath, Lance and I. Lance was the other driver. And we used to go around in his Citroën, the Traction Eyeball. And we go from one race to another, and then Al Francis, the mechanic, would take a bus that had been converted with the cars in it and go to the circuits and get it ready. It was, I mean, when I think about it, you know, it was the most fantastic life for a young man. I mean, here I was, what, 18, 19 years old, and I'm now going all over Europe. When we had no money then, we were allowed 50 quid, I think, a year. We were going all around Europe, being paid to do what I loved, which was racing, and going to fantastic circuits which were real roads. I mean, they didn't have racetracks as we know them now. And you get a place like Aix-les-Bains, and they'd say, all right, we'll put the circuit around here, and they'd go around with a truck a couple of nights before and throw straw bales overboard to stop you going up roads, and there was a circuit made. I mean, a wonderful time.
That must have been a fantastic experience for you, racing on those circuits that you'd never seen before, on road circuits.
Oh, terrific. Well, the great thing it did, I think, was that it made me learn to tell distance by what I saw. In other words, there were no signs 200 meters or anything. In other words, what I would see, I would interpret to brake, and I think it taught me an awful lot in that way. In other words, the car control and also what speed was in this sort of environment of real roads. I mean, there were curbstones and all that sort of stuff. So one had to be fairly good precision. There weren't chamfered curbs or anything, and so you didn't hit the curb, otherwise buckle the car.
That was a fantastic opportunity. Do you think it was symptomatic of the times, or because of HWM's perception?
Oh, no, no, HWM were the first from England, that's for sure. I mean, I remember going along getting my first international competition license at the RAC. And actually, it was where I met a chap called Ken Gregory. He was working there. And I showed him my road license. I gave him 5 shillings, that's 25p in today's money, and I got a license which enabled me to race in any race in the world, including Indianapolis. Not that I did, but it did. I mean, when you think about it, it's quite extraordinary, really. I mean, a super license today costs what? Do we know what it costs?
It depends on how much you're earning.
Oh, does it? Oh, really? Well, I was earning very little, so they charged me £5. But anyway, I remember getting that license, and then we could go out and race anywhere.
HWM paid for you to race at a very early stage of your career,
Yeah.
which is something that a young driver today perhaps would never achieve. I mean, would Van Diemen suddenly say, this guy's great in go-karts, we're going to pay for a full season of racing? It would never happen, and that was a phenomenal way to start your career.
Yeah, but the lucky thing was, you see, A, there were very few established drivers. That's the first thing. Remember, the war had happened. The drivers who had been racing before the war were usually in the garage business or something else. They were involved, right? There were no established names that were actually competing, so therefore when Lance Macklin, who was actually an Olympic standard skier, but Lance, who knew John Heath, and myself, I was showing because I was young, and therefore it was easier to get, if you like, ink, press, you know, write up. So somebody of 17, 18 racing on a hill climb was easier to write about for a journalist's point of view than maybe somebody 25 or 30 or 40. And so John Heath obviously heard about me. He asked me, he said, look, I'll give you 25% of the starting money, which was then about 200 quid a race. And we were racing most weeks, not every week, so I'd get about 50 quid. Well, £50 in those days would keep, you could live for 2 weeks on that. Not well, but you could live fairly well. And I would always go in and have the main course, and then I'd buy fruit on the road. And you know, it was a fantastic thing of travelling. And then when you get to a town, because you're the racing driver, you come in, this was a big thing. I mean, it's all been all around the area there. They'd been seeing a motor race coming in, the Gordinis and the Talbos and the HWMs and Ferraris and so on. And when you go into town, you were sort of a bit of a celebrity, if you like, and which made it a wonderful life, particularly for a guy of 18 or 19. I mean, it was something that couldn't happen today. It just couldn't happen. Helmets, take the idea of a helmet, for instance. Now, when I started racing, I didn't want to wear a helmet. My father said, if you're going to drive that car up a hill, you're going to wear a crash hat. And I said, well, that's ridiculous. That's a real sissy thing. I said, look at the fast drivers. Chiron, all these guys, Sommer, they wear cloth. My father said, that's it. If you don't wear a helmet, you're not racing. So I went out and got this great big thing, leather covered, and I wore it. And then gradually...
Well, that was the Tolo helmet, was it?
No, I don't know what it was.
Or was that the black one?
It was a black one.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was from. I don't know where the hell I got it.
Dispatch
and
rider.
then later on, out came Johnson's with a really nice lightweight job, and then we all started to wear those. And I'm talking now, we're talking probably 1949 or 50. And then I think helmets became mandatory a little bit later. But I remember them bringing in fireproof overalls. We could wear short sleeves. I wear short sleeves to get a suntan. And then they said, no, you must... I started to wear an overall because of oil around. And because I had to pay for these overalls. And then Pirelli came out and said, well, you know, you can wear a Pirelli overall with a really smart crossover zip, which was just the thing then. I mean, this is again in the early 50s. People don't seem to realize quite... I mean, helmets, for instance. The helmets cost £5.10 of the old money, which was a lot of money. I mean, why am I going to buy 2 unless I wreck one? And so obviously one had 1. And then if something happened to it, maybe you'd get a second one. But I mean, you wouldn't have very many of them because it's expensive.
Sterling, did you have an idol in those days? One reads that you admired Farina's style and his laid-back style. Is this true?
I admired Farina's style because I always thought he's like this and leaning back. And I thought that man looks really cool.
Physically laid back. He wasn't emotionally laid back.
No, he wasn't. He was a real dirty driver, one of the few. Actually. Now, I'd read about Prince Bira. And he was one of my fans. I'd read this thing, Roadstar hat trick and so on, and how he got the gold star for most points and so on. And I thought, my God, that guy really has to be good. And then I saw Farina's style, and I thought, well, I like that. That does look neat. And being small, if I lean back, I look taller anyway. So, you know, one develops these. I mean, it's purely ego, really. I mean, I think it looks better when you're leaning back doing that than sitting crouched up.
But did you was that completely natural to you, or did you have to make yourself?
No, to be honest, it wasn't natural. To be honest, I just liked the look of it, and therefore I thought, well, I must make it look natural. And then I began to look relaxed, and then I felt good about it. People say, my gosh, you don't look as though you're trying, and I'm really working my butt off. But it doesn't look that way, and so I thought, well, this is quite a good way of doing it, actually. One has to look at it at the time. Here we were, where England had done nothing, and we wanted to really prove how great we were. Along came this guy who could sell an Eskimo bathing costume, that's Raymond Mays. And he got all the companies, the big companies together and said, look, let's build this incredible car, which it was. One has to say, when it started up, as long as it ran, which wasn't very long, it sounded incredible. And it was sleek looking. I remember it so well, because I saw it as a kid, and I thought, God, that is unbelievable. When I get older, maybe I can drive that thing. Then they asked me in the early 50s to go to Monza to test it, which I thought was a great idea. Now, I go to Monza, I might be there a month, if you like, or maybe more, and only get one drive, because you'd start the thing up, go a few half a mile, and then something would go wrong. And then they had to strip the 16-cylinder engine down, and they'd find out plug gaps were closing, 72 pounds of boost. I mean, it was an incredible car, and fast. It wouldn't corner, the wheels used to flap, and I'd come in, I'd say to Peter Burton, who designed it, I said, the wheels are flapping. He said, well, are they flapping like this or like that? I said, well, quite honestly, I hadn't paid much attention. I said, jump on the back, because it had a tail, and he sat on the tail. And I only had to go over the pavé turn there for him to see. And I came in, I said, look, you need to see the mistake. Well, of course, that was a complete redesign. And all the time things were happening like this, and here was this wonderful car. It got so hot inside they started to cut away this beautiful body, and then they put air scoops here and air scoops, and in the end it looked pretty ugly, and it never went. And so it was a tremendous waste of time, but interesting.
But why is it so revered, the V16? I mean, I still think it's probably the silliest racing car that was ever conceived or built.
Yeah.
And to me, you know, I was very young when it was racing, but I remember it, and all it was a noise.
Yeah, but what a noise. I mean, it took England's hopes. Here was this car, beautiful to look at, fantastic to hear, and we all really wanted it to win, to go and beat the Germans, the Italians, the French, the lot, and our hopes were in this thing. And yet it was really so difficult to drive. I mean, I did drive it actually in Ireland.
He wanted it easy, you see, soft young man.
Well, there you were. I drove it in Ireland, though, you know, in the rain, and thank God they'd switched my engine with Fangios the night before. I didn't know this, but they had. And thank God they did, and they gave me his dog instead. He had mine. And because it rained, and I mean, it's the only time I ever passed Fangio. He was going backwards. I mean, the cars were so bad. You put your foot down, they're going the wrong way. And I remember passing Juan, and there he is going backwards, pretty fast, mind you. You know, it's incredibly bad to car.
So did that experience dampen your enthusiasm for patriotism? Because you,
no,
long afterwards, you accepted an offer to drive for Ferrari, didn't you? It didn't work out.
No, I was given an offer for Ferrari, which I turned down quite early. But I later on drove for Maserati, and the reason I drove for Maserati, or a Maserati, not for Maserati, was because my father and Ken, my manager, had gone to see Neubauer late in '53, I think it was, and said, listen, what about taking my son or our boy into your team? And he'd said, well, look, we think he's doing pretty well. We would like to see him in a winning car. And I think you'll find, you know, Maserati might sell you one, and that is actually why.
But going back a second though, surely with the Ferrari thing, you were prepared to drive the Ferrari, it's just that they put Taruffi in the car at the last minute.
Yes, I'd agreed to go and drive a Ferrari.
So why did you agree to do it if you were so patriotic?
Mainly because I hadn't got a car to drive there. I mean, it wasn't for the whole year, this was a drive in Bari, I think it was, and I went down there and I found the car because it was a new 4-cylinder. I sat in it, and the mechanic said, you know, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm trying the car I'm meant to be driving this, and it's been a mistake. It's Mr. Taruffi's car. Well, I have great respect for Taruffi, but frankly, I'd flogged all the way down there with my father, and I thought, well, screw this. So I vowed then I wouldn't race for Ferrari. I would not race for Ferrari, and I'll try and beat him with something else, hopefully English. And
so that fueled your patriotism more than anything else then, probably?
No, I can't intrude my
relish beating Ferraris there.
Oh, yes. I mean, I was after Ferrari, certainly, but in an English car if I could.
Do you think you wasted a couple of years there refusing to drive a foreign car after being let down by Ferrari?
If your idea of success is to go for the title, the World Championship, yes, I think it was probably not the right move. But my idea of racing is to obviously try for the World Championship, but it isn't the be-all and end-all. I mean, I must admit, it meant a tremendous amount to me when I lost it to Mike Hawthorne the first year. I was very disappointed because I did think that I was quicker than him, and he got the title. And it happened again, and after a couple of times, I sort of consoled myself with the knowledge that the other drivers, I think, thought that I was the guy to beat. If they could beat me, that was important, and therefore I felt, well, that was good enough, and the title didn't really matter. What mattered to me was today's race, not last week, because that's gone, not next week, because we're not there, but today. Today I can get killed, today I can have success, I can lose my reputation or whatever. And so I race for today. And so if the title falls in with what I've done, then that's very nice. But basically, I race.
Something that's always astounded me is that at the end of 55, Mercedes had quit. And so you were looking for something for 56, which we were going to drive. And there were the 3 British teams, all of whom wanted you, BRM, Connaughton, Vanwall, plus Maserati. And you actually got together for every sort of major British journalist you could think of, didn't you, for a lunch at the RAC?
Yes.
And you asked them. I mean, it's hard in our generation to take that in.
Yeah, but it should happen today. If they took our advice, everything would be much better, wouldn't it? There's no doubt about that.
No, but what happened, you see, I wanted to get back into English cars because I am British and I love racing in green, so. But that was actually, it was important to me to know what the feeling was, because when you are, if you like, at the leading edge of racing, as I happened to be at that time, one's reputation and everything matters. I mean, I admit it. I mean, I do admit that I want to be able to walk down the street with my head held high and say, well, I'm English and I've done well. And it meant a lot to me what the press thought, because they were the people that felt the temperature of the public, if you like. And I didn't want to go and damage something that I felt I'd built up. In other words, I am a British guy, I do want to drive British, but what am I going to do? There were no English cars at all that were worth calling anything. And I wanted you guys and the Nationals to sort of say, well, we agree with you, where else are you going to go? Because I felt that was...
It was a very shrewd PR move, way ahead of its time in terms of the way you were thinking
was it the conclusion you had already reached? Were you actually?
No, I hadn't made a decision. I knew in my own mind it was the only way it should be.
Yeah.
That really that I had to get a foreign car, and they endorsed it really, if you like, and then then it was done.
Mm.
What I find unbelievable, going back to 53, 54, was the fact that I think you were on the water, on a boat when the contract with Maserati was signed, and you heard about it on a telephone call, and then the press greeted you at the docks and said, what do you think, Mr. Moss, about driving an Italian car? And
yeah.
It was just news to you.
Well, it wasn't news. I'd heard when you couldn't speak on the telephone quite as easily as nowadays. The shock really was they bought it with my money. I'd saved a bit of money. And to hear my father and Ken so say that they used up my money to buy this, that was a shock. But the
£5,200?
No, 3,700, I think.
Oh, was it?
But the good deal they had arranged with Maserati was that my car, because you know if you buy a factory car, it's never the same. But they had agreed that my car would be the same as the factory. And I remember going to a race, you know, and I'm going down the straight, flat out, and Bearer comes off me, like this. And
he always had better engines, Bearer.
Well, I came into he was driving for them, see. I came into the pit, I said, you know, what the hell, I meant to have the same car. They said, well, we didn't want you to have it until we'd proven it. And we felt this was too new, we didn't want it to be used as a tryout. But I had a nice relationship, actually, with Maserati. They were very nice people.
So Stirling, as a patriot, was driving for an Italian team more acceptable than driving for a German team?
No, because they're quite different, funnily enough, because the Italians have a passion. And they love their racing. The Germans have a business, and they make them a most fantastic organisation. So completely different. I mean, to drive for the Italians, when my brake pedal failed, completely broke off because it'd been overheated when the guy welded it, and the mechanics were in tears.
That was at Maserati.
That was at Maserati, exactly. But that's the Italian way. Now, the German way, there's shop the man. I mean, or whatever. But there was certainly a difference of passion, but the efficiency of which way do you want it. But no, it was quite different. But
As Doug said, the shooting wasn't long over when you drove for Mercedes. Was that something that the press at least were aware of? Was it an issue
Funnily
at the time?
enough, the press weren't. There certainly was a big resistance. I mean, there were a lot of people who wouldn't buy Mercedes because we'd fought the Germans and so on at that time, there's no doubt. And I think going to Germany, funnily enough, it didn't come up nearly as strongly as we would think now looking back on it. No, it didn't. I mean, I don't remember getting hate mail.
Within the press at that time, really, you're going to drive, well, first of all for Maserati and then going from there to drive for the Germans, for Mercedes-Benz, was all in the backwash, in the shadow of Hawthorne having gone to drive for Ferrari.
Yeah, to
in
avoid the
53,
call-up, as
wasn't
they
it?
said, yes.
And he'd been very heavily
and it was
criticised by the,
Hawthorne,
National Society.
yes, it was Hawthorne who ran into all the flack, wasn't it?
Well,
so that essentially, you know, that scenario had been run.
When you went to Mercedes after all these adventures, was that like a Crew Alexandra player suddenly signing for Manchester United and being confronted with a completely different culture and mentality?
yes. Yes, it was. I mean, I can explain that to you best if I say I went for a tryout in the middle of, you know, I mean, really cold day and so on. Anyway, I did this, and I came in, of course, in those days, it had inboard brakes, and so I got a black face, except for where my goggles were. And a mechanic came up to me, clicked his heels, and he got a bowl of water, hot water. This is in the middle of nowhere. Over here was a towel. Here was a piece of soap. And I sort of do this, and I thought, oh my God, in Italy, boy, the water would be cold or something, you know. And it was so, the contrast was enormous. I mean, that's the way it was. And you know, they had everything. You know, what do you want? How do you? What about what steering ratio do you want? What gear? You know, everything was the way you wanted. I had a 3-spoke steering wheel. The others had 4. And the steering wheel on that car actually would come out because most of the drivers had rather bigger stomachs. I didn't need to take mine out. But you know, the whole thing, it was so efficient. I mean, give you one example. I'm racing at Monza on that banking, and we had a little windscreen like a bug deflector out there, which of course was necessary because it took the air over at the top of your head. This thing, I was following Fangio, and a stone came up and broke it. So the first thing the mechanics knew, I'm coming into the pits pointing at this thing that isn't there. 39 seconds later, I'd go out with a new one. And the next race, if the same thing happened, to push a button, another one came up. You know, I mean, this sort of thing was the way it was. And that's what made them so different to what I've been used to. I mean, the Italians are lovely people, but if I come in with it missing, I mean, I'm sure they wouldn't have the Allen key that fitted, or if they had the you know, who's got the windscreen? You know what I mean? I mean, not only the Italians, but the contrast was enormous. But I still miss the passion of the Italians. That they're lovely people, but to have this efficiency and then had to have with Fangio to drive with, of course, and Neubauer running, it was tremendous.
Alfred Neubauer was really the forerunner of the modern strategy, really, the idea that teams have strategies.
He's known to be very brusque and all that, but from a driver's point of view, he was very, very simpatico. He really was. He was like a father figure, and he'd care about, you know, that you've got a quiet room and this, and all these sort of things.
Did he try to discipline you in terms of when you went to bed and what you ate and how often you...
Not really. I mean,
out.
no, he was pretty liberal
Did such
about
a
the
thing?
crumpet as well. No, he was a very human and understanding man. Actually, I remember him saying he'd got a 56-year-old secretary who's going to change it to 2 25-year-olds or something. And these sort of things. But no, he had a great sense of humour. Great sense of humour.
Didn't he decide that you young chaps on the plane down to Argentina,
I mean,
you know, you were getting bored and it was time to wake you up a bit?
well, he went. This was in a thing called a DC6B or something, which was a long job. And at the back of it, it had 2. I think we must have been going tourists. Two toilets, and Fangio and Neubauer, who's a very big man, had gone back, you see, to the toilet, and then we suddenly hear, "Der Hermann de Moss kommt," and we look down the back there, and there's Neubauer pretending he's stuck in the door, and we had to go and try and put him out of this toilet. But he was always, you know, larking around like that. I mean, he was a very, very human person, actually. Actually, I've got an interesting thing here you may not have seen. This is the box that Jenks, who is my guide dog, this guy,
Yeah.
and this has on it all the stuff he wrote. We went round making these laps. We did quite a few laps of practice. And don't forget, it took 2 days to practice for one lap, and because no way was I going to learn 1,000 miles, which is what, probably 14 or 15,000 corners. So I said to Jenks, we've got a car that do 170, 175 miles an hour, not kilometers. And I don't know where we're going, so we're going to have some way, you are going to have to tell me what to do. And when you come up a fast incline like this, let's say 160 through a town, and you go over the brow, you don't know if it goes left or right. Well, with this thing, he knew.
Yeah.
And I'd come up, you know, into a town, and he'd go on like this, and that means it's flat out. Or you might go like this, right, and then I'd know, and I could see it out of the corner of my eye. And then I'd drive accordingly. And this was all this guy, Jenks, who was 3 times world champion in the motorcycle. well, I don't know what you think about going in the sidecar of a motorcycle, but I reckon you have to be mad. And I thought, well, if he can do that, the only thing you know, they put a lion on the. I've seen lions in circuses going around. Well, they've been doped. So you either had to be lion or Jenks. And I thought, well, Jenks has to be the guy to do this because he's a very intelligent guy, even though he went in this thing. And he was a journalist and therefore knew what it was all about. And this was his idea. So I said to him, how are we going to do it? He said, well, let's write it all down. So we wrote it all down. But then the problem came that when you come into a really fast curve like that, we wouldn't bother to write it down because you could see it. But when there are people standing there, 6-foot wall, you couldn't see a damn thing. So that was the one place that this didn't help us. But the main thing for this was to let me go flat out when I can and we weren't sure, which was like over brows, or slow me down when I didn't think it was, you know. And so that was absolutely...
But it didn't help much when you found some sheep in your path in practice, did it?
No, well, there's no sheep on there. No, that was, yeah, this, you know what, this guy's driving his sheep back, and we're coming along in the SLR. Not that fast, but reasonably quickly. Side bloop, and he looks up like this and waves as they do in Italy, you know. And then he saw one of his sheep up the front, so he threw this great big barge at the sheep, and of course the poor thing jumped the wrong way, straight into our car, which was on practice. And we had a few other problems.
So did you trust him completely if he gave you the sign for flat out right? You had absolute faith in him?
Absolutely.
After the first few miles, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, obviously, but the point was we had such confidence in each other. I mean, I remember saying to Jenks after the race, I said, what about doing it another year in an MG or something? He said, no way. I said, why not? He said, well, I know how to drive an MG. He said, it frightened me to death. He said, but in this thing, he would sit there and pull his little beard, you know, and he'd be interested in how I managed to get away with what we're doing. And you need a man who's as weird as that, and he was weird. I mean, a fabulous character. And, I mean, he was a guy.
But was that a very novel thing at the time? Were no other drivers talking about that sort of thing at all?
No, that's the first time.
It never occurred to anybody to do that.
Well, a lot of people didn't even have a navigator, did they?
No, they didn't. They could go, I mean, Fangio chose to go on his own, for instance.
But that was because of his accident when his co-driver was killed in the South American
in South America,
race.
yeah.
But Taruffi didn't have one, did he?
No, well, Taruffi,
no, he knew the roads very well.
Most of the fast drivers did not have one of those. Some of the fast drivers reasonably knew the road, but I can't believe they knew it properly, because there's no way you're going to learn that distance. But that, I mean, interesting thing, I said to Jenks, why didn't we try an intercom? And apparently we had. And what had happened, I'd gone out, we had this intercom between us, the best they had in Germany, fantastic thing. And I said to Jenks, okay, now I'm going to try down this bit of the footer, you know, and practice. So I go down the footer fast, and he doesn't say a bloody word. I said, well, what's up with you? He said, well, I told you. I said, well, I didn't hear a damn thing. So years later, we're at some party, or he's somewhere, and he meets a guy from Cornell University, I think, and he was telling this man, and said, well, of course not. He said, if you are concentrating 100%, you know, literally on that, you don't feel pain, and you can't hear because it's not relevant. And Jenks remarked, you know, typical Jenks, he said, well, that just shows you the difference. He said, if rally drivers really were on 10/10, he said, they wouldn't hear their pace notes.
He's always very dismissive.
Yes, he was dismissive.
Yeah, absolutely. Did this go with you in 56 and 57 as well?
Yes, it did. We modified, because each, but changed because
that's the 57 roll.
That is the 57 roll in there now, yeah. Right. Yeah, but it did, the principle of that, yeah.
How long did it take you? I mean, I'm just thinking, you were watching Jenks' signals.
Yeah, out of the corner of my eye like this.
Now, I mean, how long did it take before that became completely automatic and you weren't actually... I wonder if initially you were distracted by, Christ, what's he doing?
No, because I'm sure in practice, I mean, when we do a practice, partly to get to know the type of what the place was like and so on and so forth, we had to learn quite a few things about how to change a wheel quickly because in case we had a tyre go down or something, which in fact we didn't. I mean, we went because we had arranged with Mercedes, we'd stop at Rome and change tyres and everything else, and we had a 40-some gallon tank, so we could do it. But I think we must have been doing it, and when we came to the race itself, I was obviously quite used to it, and you know, and I did have that much faith in him. Yeah. But there were a lot of problems in the meeting. I mean, 10-hour race. Well, we thought it'd be 11 or 12 hours, and I said to Jakes, I don't know about you, but I'm going to have to stop and pee. I mean, I can't do that long. So Jakes said, all right. I said, well, look, what we're going to do, we're going to obviously stop on a hairpin because that's when you're going slowest. I said, now, what you must do, you must prepare yourself, it is in practice. And when we come to hairpin, I'm going to stop, we'll jump out, have a quick spend a penny and jump back in, and off we'll go, which we did. Well, of course, it took quite a long time. I mean, you know, it isn't that easy. And so I said to Jiggs, look, there's no way we can waste a minute or whatever it's taken. I said, what we'll do is when we get to Rome, which is halfway roughly, we're going to change the tires, they're going to change the refuel and all that. We'll do it there. So we thought, great. So we come into Rome, and what have they done? Put up 25,000 grandstands. Well, I mean, it wasn't so easy to jump out. I mean, I had to get out and go round and back. By the time, 1 minute, 4 seconds later, I came back, boy, having had a slash, and there's the car all ready to go, polished and washed and ready. It's quite a... The event was an amazing event. They started at 9 o'clock at night, half-minute intervals until midnight. Those are the slow cars, the Italian hairdressers with their Fiats and everything. And the go-faster stripes and all that stuff. And then at midnight, they let the faster ones go at 1 minute intervals, and we started at 7:22 in the morning, and we weren't the last. So it gives you an idea. I mean, there were about 600 cars.
Yeah.
And after, I would say, the first hour, which is 100 miles or a bit over, you've probably seen at least 100 off the road already. I mean, people really go a bit berserk.
But in fact, I mean, the really slow people, you never actually caught, did you?
Yes.
Who had gone 10 hours earlier than you?
Oh, yes, we did. But you know the little eggs, those little Isetta things? Well, now the Isettas we caught on the last bit on the last fast bit, coming in from Manta or somewhere. And there they are. The roads in those days were very crowned. And these things are sitting in the middle of the crown, because if they're on the side, they're having to steer uphill. And there's 3 of these things going down the road. Now, they've been going since 9 o'clock the night before. Yeah. And they've got these tuned engines, you can imagine, 120, 250 cc's, whatever. And these poor little men, 2 guys sitting in there, and screaming noise, and they're not really expecting it. And of course, I come past in the SLR, and we're doing 170. And I had to pull off the side like go back. And I remember looking in the mirror, and the bloke's like this, trying to keep it straight. Because when a Merc passes you, an SLR passes you at 170, boy, it moves a lot of air. And if you happen to be an Isetta inside the air, I reckon you move around. But you didn't catch that many. No, it's quite true, because most of them had fallen by the wayside, actually.
Yeah, they were starting at 9, and you were, yeah.
That's
Do you remember your spin coming down off the pass?
Not specifically. I know we had one.
Yes. Jenks told me that he reached across as you were doing a 3-point turn to get going again.
Yeah.
He reached across to ensure that the reverse lockout mechanism in the gear change gate was replaced. And as he was moving the lockout across, you smashed it back into reverse and trapped his finger in the gear change gate.
Oh, really?
Yes, because
Stirling's amazing.
well, he's totally insensitive to the pain suffered by his navigator.
Well, I must tell you, we got to the top of the hill there, at Goodwood, and Jakes was there. He said, we're talking about the Mille Miglia. He said, do you remember the Futa? So I said, yeah, I wanted to do the Futa in 1 hour, you see. And he said, my gosh, he said, when we got to the top of the Futa, he said, I saw you look at your watch. He said, I thought, gosh, now we're going to really go. And I thought, by God, I've been going for 800 miles flat out. Because like this, now we're going to really move to try and beat the hour.
That convinced you he was a nut.
Yes. Yes.
You actually hated the Mille Miglia by the end of the whole thing, did you not? Even before the Targa.
I was frightened by it. In truth, the Mille Miglia frightened me, because I didn't know the circuit. I didn't realize how good Jenks would be. I knew I was going to have to go as near to 10 tenths, probably 9 tenths as I could. I realized that doing 170 miles an hour, it's difficult if anything goes wrong. Not only with the car, but I mean, there are so many things that can go wrong when you're passing other cars that aren't really expecting you, and doing that, it's frightened me. And that's why I didn't really enjoy, as I did enjoy the Targa Florio, which was only 43 miles a lap, which I could learn, and it was equally a fantastic road around Sicily. And so I enjoyed that race much more, because it was I could race that, whereas the Mille Miglia I didn't really race. I went as fast as I possibly could, but it wasn't what I'd call really racing.
Florio was 10 laps, and Mille Miglia was point to point. Every corner was new.
Exactly.
And could the road really be closed on the Mille Miglia, or did things stray into it?
Doctors. There were people. They weren't really a problem in truth, but they were. Yes, there were. Refrigerated trucks, I suppose, things like that. But mostly people were off watching it, I mean, the crowds of people, they say 5 million, I've no idea, I didn't count them all, actually, I lost count before we got to Rome. But the amount of people that watched it was enormous, because it was in Italy, when we go around practicing for weeks before, as soon as they'd see you arrive in a car, Windsor, and they were so keen. the whole Italian nation. I was rather like working out the World Cup here, I suppose, with football. An enormous enthusiasm.
54 was the first time that you were on the world stage as a World Championship contender. Was that the sort of defining moment of your career at that
to
point?
me, my defining moment, in truth, was the Swiss Grand Prix, which was early on, a very difficult circuit at Bremgarten, and I had my private Mazda, and the first day of practice was wet, and Fangio was there, well, the Mercedes were there, and Ferrari were there, and Maserati and so on, and I managed to get my private Mazda on pole. And I think that's what made Neubauer decide he wanted me the following year for sure, and I think that was...
What made the works think that they wanted you as a
yes, I think so.
factory driver?
Yeah. I think that was a big move.
And you did actually finish that year in a factory car, didn't you?
Yes, they came to me and said, see, it was a lot cheaper to drive a factory car. They also gave me nearly 1,000 revs more because I didn't want to wear mine out, and I used to keep mine to about 7,000. The factory let me use 7,800, and obviously that much more power and so on.
But was Bremgarten the first time that you individually felt, I can actually beat Fangio or race with him?
It was, I think it was probably, the TT was probably the first time actually, because I drove a Jaguar, but that was not Formula One. In Formula One, that probably was my most important moment, because I didn't think for a moment I could beat Fangio or the others, but it let me realize I'm playing in the same game. In other words, I'm not one of the also rounds at the back. Yes, it was a very, very, very important time to me.
You, from the way you've been talking tonight, you've been talking about preparation and anticipation of problems that could go wrong in a way that makes me feel that you were way ahead of your time again in that area. You were planning things, like the Mille Miglia is a good example. And there were other examples of wanting to try different chassis for different circuits and always thinking things through before you got in the car. Was that something that, at the time, I guess was completely natural to you and seemed to be the logical way of going racing? Were you aware that you were doing something new then at the time?
Well, I was very used to certain development work. We take a car out and try it on one tyre versus another, then we'd try suspension settings on that sort of thing. I mean, I'm no engineer, that's for sure. I wouldn't drive anything I built, I can tell you that. But I'm interested in what makes a car the way I want it to be. And if you take a vehicle, the vehicle does tell the driver something. I mean, when you take it, it's like a relationship. It's like if you go out with a new lady. I mean, one tries to build up a sort of rapport or relationship and so on. You know whether this is worth pursuing or it isn't. Well, now, if in a car it isn't, you sort of scrap it and put different roll bars and change the springs. With a lady, it's a bit different. But there's no doubt that when you get a car set up correctly, it gives you the message, and it is your job as a driver to be able to make that car the way you can understand what language it's using.
But compared with Collins, Hawthorne, Fangio, you were much more precise about such things, were you not?
Yes, I was. But
the mechanics say you were pernickety, particular and demanding.
Sterling, who else
I think it was my
thinking
biggest
that way
problem
at that time? Can you think of any other? It was Brooks.
Tony Brooks, I think, would be
Relatively
probably the
particular.
nearest. Yes, I would think so. Because I mean, Mike was a playboy. He had fun, and you give him a car, and he'd do a good job. Peter Collins, much the same. Fangio was so great in my mind that really whatever they gave him, he would do the best that could be done with it. I think his great strength was that he had that enormous talent. I don't think he knew much about the car. I don't think that Fangio could have taken a car in the way that Jack Brabham could and make it into what he wanted. Fangio, at our meetings, he would usually say he would have the same as me. I mean, not, after we'd been out in practice, the team manager Neubauer would say, anything you want altering, do you want a higher gear ratio, or what do you want to do, or whatever. And Fangio normally would say, anche io, after I'd said what I wanted, and we left it at that. So.
And did you always let him have all your information and your thoughts? Of course you did. You were a great sportsman.
I did. I did right up until the TT. I particularly wanted to win the TT. I don't know why it meant so much to me, but I particularly wanted to win the Tourist Trophy in Dundrod, and I felt, frankly, that we could do with a slightly higher gear for the long pull-up at the back in fourth, because we had fifth for the straight. And anyway, I was thinking, well, forget it. So I said, no, everything's very good. And Fangio said, mine as well. And then afterwards I went to Uhlenhout and I said, look, Rudy, I think on second thoughts I'd like a higher fourth to go up the back hill, and which he did. I suppose that was the first time really that I didn't feel that I should give Fangio my knowledge.
Did he ever find out about your fourth gear?
I don't know.
But it's interesting, though, that he just didn't reach the same conclusion himself. I mean, he drove the car in practice, and it didn't.
Well,
enter his head to-
but he was that good. He could make do with what he got.
Yeah,
Better
but,
than
but he wasn't as quick as you in a sports car.
No, he wasn't. No, that's true.
And you'd have thought, therefore,
Yeah,
in
but he
those
wasn't as quick as
circumstances,
Stirling
he'd have
at
been...
the British Grand Prix 55 either. If you look at
No,
the
no.
film there, you are all over him. Not all over him, it's an exaggeration, but...
Yeah, I still don't know. I still don't look.
Jury's still out on that one.
Yeah. But how did you feel when you were behind him? Did you think, I'm going to pass this guy if I get
No,
the
no,
opportunity?
no. Look, let me tell you this. When I drove Mercedes, the only rule they had was that after we had 30 seconds lead, now it's a long time. In those days it wasn't. When we had 30 seconds lead, that's the leading car, then they put out REG, regularity, which meant stay as you are. Now, I was quite frankly happy because Fangio was he's such a fantastic man anyway. I was happy to sit behind him, and when we got to 30 seconds, I'd stay there. That didn't worry me. In sports cars, we didn't have it because sports cars, they weren't run like that. And only one race in the whole year did they ever say, we want Fangio to win. That, I think, was the sports car race at Kristianstad, when I think I could have won it.
Why was that so vital?
I suppose it was a good market, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thought maybe you were going to say Buenos Aires.
No.
You know.
No, there was never a time other than that one was the only time when it was said that he should win.
But putting that to one side, though, when you were actually behind Fangio in the early stages of the British Grand Prix, did you feel that he was going slower than you would comfortably have gone if you were on your own?
No, because I
you
think
look as if you've got more road to play with.
Yes,
you look as if
yes,
you've
but
got...
what you've got to realise is when you're racing,
Follow the
old boy,
leader.
the slower you can go if you're in the lead, the happier you feel. I mean, in other words, if Fangio was in the lead, I was second, the other guys are further back, and he goes a bit slower than I maybe could do if I'm not going to sort of say, well, he's going too slowly. It just doesn't arise.
But in the last Fangio biography, he suggests that on the night before the race, the factory decided you were going to win, and that his gear ratios were changed secretly the night before the race to give him lower ratios so that you would win the race. Now, wouldn't you have known about, when you were following him earlier in the race, wouldn't you have known if he had something different?
I don't think he did. I find that doubtful to believe. But I can tell you this: when I got round the last corner, I pulled over and I left him room.
You can see that in the
Yes, I
film.
turned around and said, "Come, you know." But I had my foot flat on the bloody floor.
And why did you do that? Why did
Because I thought, well, at least I'm doing the decent thing, I suppose. I mean, I knew bloody well he couldn't pass me. No, unless he had another 50 horsepower, he's not going to pass me. So therefore, I can be frightfully gentle and say, after you. Yeah. No, I wanted to win. Let's say I did, and I still don't know whether Fangio.
Nigel, doesn't this remind you of Peroni Villeneuve at Imola? I mean, it's just exactly the same, isn't it?
It's pretty significant, though, that Fangio was crossed the line in the Berlin Grand Prix at Aarhus, about the same distance behind Kling.
Yes.
So Mercedes had a nice German victory in Berlin, and they had a nice British victory at Aintree, and so on and so forth.
But you
I
know,
think
Stirling,
Stirling won that
if you
day.
look at the film of 55, in the early laps, Fangio's leading, you're second. Barra is third, some way back.
Yes.
And he's actually catching you.
He is.
I mean,
That's
and
the
then
point.
suddenly he's right with you.
Yes.
And the impression you certainly have at the time is you're sort of getting a bit impatient. Come on, you know.
Yeah, Fangio's holding up. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
Because in fact, all right, the chances were he wasn't going to last. But he was certainly close enough perhaps to sort of think about having a go at you and perhaps taking you off and, you know.
I don't think there was any question of taking you off.
I don't mean in the deliberate sense. I mean just, you know, Barra trying a do-or-die attempt and perhaps, you know.
Barra was going that quickly. The Mazda must have been good that day.
You know, the thing is, the Maserati was catching you. It shouldn't have been. And that's where you sort of get the impression you're... And then you pass Fangio and you take the lead and you actually leave him behind for a while.
Well, we're talking a long time ago. And
Yeah.
I can't. If I'm honest, I can't say I remember specifically this, that, the. All I can tell you is the principles. One is that I've written Fangio is the finest driver in the world. I was happy as anything to sit behind him. The British Grand Prix I want to win more than any other Grand Prix for obvious reasons. Now, if Barra was coming up, then it is possible I may have thought, Christ, this gives me the excuse I need to pass him without appearing to be irrespectful, if you like. So maybe. I don't honestly remember.
That's conjecture then.
Yes, it's conjecture.
And this is a bit of a personal question, but do you think the reason you can't remember that is because of the accident? or because of the passage of time in
No,
general?
I had more passage of time.
You were 25 years old.
But I'm surprised
It was
you
your
can't
home
remember
Grand
that.
Prix. It was an incredible day for you. It must have been the best day of your life.
Yes.
What's it like after all this time to have people like us still asking questions about it, casting little doubts, shadows?
I suppose it's flattering.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's nobody one likes to speak about more than oneself, let's face it. So, I mean,
But Stanley, I'm amazed you can't remember that, because that would be that's a critical thing for you to have known, surely, whether or not you actually wanted to get past Banjo and if he was holding you up or not.
I have a vague thing in the back of my head that if the car, if Berra, as he did, in fact, had come up, then the Regularia sign wasn't out, and okay, it would be quite free for me so to do. But I don't believe that even if I could have passed him then, I just feel he's the best driver in the world, and in that I think I was more versatile than he was. I think I'm a more versatile driver because I could drive anything. He was more restricted to Formula One, but under that circumstance, I just don't know. I really don't know. I think it could be, as you say, that I saw Berra coming up, and that was that gave me the impetus to kick off and say, all right, I'm going to go. Maybe.
But there are moments in that film when you're together and Fangio's in front, and you can see Fangio taking a different line to you into corners and on exit, and you're actually using different bits of road.
Yeah.
And to my eye, at least, it looks like you're just totally on top of the car and doing exactly what you want to do, and Fangio's just sliding a little bit more. Beautiful control, wonderful car control, but you look that much more precise and that much more on it. Whether it was symptomatic of that specific day, because I haven't seen much film of any other races, or whether it was always like that, I don't know.
Well, all I do know is that if that is the case, then maybe when I asked Juan whether he let me win it, and don't forget I don't speak the language that well, I understood from him, no, of course I didn't. You were on form, it was your day, and that's it. That's what he told me. I don't know. I really, truly don't know, but if he did, then that's very nice. If he didn't, then obviously I'm a bit happier to think that I beat him. But to beat a guy in one race doesn't make you better. And that's the point, and I think he's the greatest.
What was it like then, in terms of your life and your regime as a racing driver? Did you work out in the Michael Schumacher sense of the word? Did you
No.
eat and drink normally? How did you live your life?
You've got to realise I was racing every week. I raced 57 times in my last year, so I was racing every week. And a race a week means at least 3 days of driving, because you've got your race day and at least 2 days of practice, maybe 3. Then you had the odd bits of testing when you're trying one tire versus another, or shock absorbers or something else. So I was continually doing what I was, the sport that I was taking part in all the time. So I was really very, very fit. And I think I was as fit as the drivers of today for what I did. I probably wasn't as fit across the board, because I think probably they are training muscles they're not using. I mean, for instance, my neck was nowhere near like the modern driver, because we didn't get the lateral G. But certainly all the muscles I needed to drive, I was exercising 3 or 4 times a week. Food, as far as food was concerned, I ate whatever I liked, with the exception of on race day I would always have eggs in the morning, because I understand they're easier to digest, but otherwise I didn't drink. But otherwise it was just an ordinary life.
But you did smoke the odd cigarette.
Yeah, I did, because I actually had a commercial, I mean, an advert thing that's, when I smoke, I don't smoke often, but I do. When I do, I'm choosy, and I smoke Craven A.
Yeah.
And, that helped. I mean, because money was much more difficult then. You've got to realise, I mean, it was a different scene. I mean, I was the highest paid driver in the world, I think, in Formula One in 61. And my total gross income was about 32,000.
And that was everything. That was
everything.
That was
yeah.
not just
I had to pay my expenses
yeah.
and pay care. I paid tax on 8,000, which was a lot of money. I mean, £8,000 was a lot of money to pay tax on. I mean, you had to be a fantastic surgeon to earn that amount, but it doesn't compare with what one can generate today.
I was trying to work out some sort of comparison specifically between you in that year and Schumacher last year. And the only way I could think of to do it was to work out how many new Rolls Royces you could have bought with your salary in 1961, and how many Schumacher could have bought new Rolls Royces at 1997 prices last year. You could have bought 7 Rolls Royces in 1961. Schumacher could have bought 178 Rolls Royces last year. That's the difference.
Doesn't that make you feel good?
And Stirling probably did 178 races, and Schumacher 7 races as well.
Yeah.
So who got the better value for money?
Yeah, well, no, but the point was, what you've got to realise is I was doing something that I loved and I enjoyed and got the exhilaration and pleasure from it. I mean, I would rather do that motor race than anything else.
I mean, not only were you paid comparatively little.
Well, nothing for testing at all.
No. But also, you know, the risks were, I mean,
Yes,
ludicrously
yeah,
high.
but you've got to understand the risks.
And it was something that was in your mind and just accepted as part of it,
And
wasn't it?
defined you as a driver and the way you drove.
Needed as part of it.
Yes,
Because
sure.
to me, when you get in the car and you're driving right on the limit, the exhilaration, the enormous pleasure and satisfaction you get by going round at what you think, Christ, that is about as fast as I'm ever going to get. That is enormous. It's an achievement. Now, if that's because the danger's there. It's rather like if you're playing cards and you've got little chips or something, and, you know, bits of paper. It's nice, but if we start paying you, even if it's only 1p a go, it's more of an. Even though I don't need the winnings, it's more serious. Well, the same when you are risking your life, that makes it pretty damn serious. There's nothing more serious to me than my life. I mean, you know, I love life. I don't want to lose it, and I think that the great thing about motor racing in our era was that was part of the whole thing that you were trying to.
Part of the bargain.
Well, exactly, it was, yes.
And
I
it
think
heightened the pleasure that you got.
yes, I think, you see, I do think the danger is rather a necessity of motor racing myself. I feel that otherwise, what stops everybody having a go? I mean, if you take a high wire and you put it that far over the floor, I'll see if I can do it. I'd be interested in how far I can get. But no way am I going to walk where Blondin did. You know, I mean, it's a totally different thing, and I feel that
But
motor
the skill
racing
level's the same in both cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And motor racing, you can't say bring the danger back because that isn't feasible. But I think the fact that we had the danger always sitting there, it actually sharpened our enjoyment of achievement.
Jackie Stewart's often talked about that period when he lost a lot of his friends in
That's
Formula
a
1.
tragedy of it. Yeah.
And you lost a lot of your friends, but did it not have the same effect on you? Did you just think, well, that's part of the game, we'll just get on with it?
Unfortunately, it sounds very hard, but quite honestly, when one's in the game playing, you know your friends know what the dangers are. Nobody's that stupid, they don't. They know exactly what it is. And occasionally people would get killed, I mean, probably 2 or 3 a year, which was a terrible thing to happen. But you know when you're doing it that if we all stop doing it, it's not going to really help. It's going to take away something that we're enjoying. If I stop racing and you continue, I'm going to deprive myself of the pleasure that I get. And you always feel when somebody else is hurt, there's 3 things for an accident. 1 is oil on the track, 2 is mechanical failure, and 3 is your mistake. Now, I can't really... Oil on the track now, thank God, is nearly gone because of marshalling and because of the catch tanks. Mechanical failures are very rare, thank God. That's the one thing I found very difficult to accept, which, of course, with Lotuses and things, you had it happen. But I can accept if I make a mistake that it's going to be serious. And therefore, I leave myself a certain amount of... I leave myself a little bit of room to maneuver in. And if somebody else, you think, well, crikey, I'm sure that wouldn't happen to me because I really believe that I wouldn't be going quite as fast at that particular point, or if I was, I'd be slightly different. And I suppose one does that to give oneself solace. If you think about accidents, then I'm not going to get up and drive a car. No. Because accidents, unfortunately, were, and are, I suppose, integral with the sport. If you make a mistake or you do the wrong thing. To me, the exhilaration is in competing. Sure. I mean, accidents are awful, you know. I mean, I can remember the wheel came off my Lotus 140 and the thing inverted itself and I broke my back and my legs. And when I came to, which was the same, I don't know if I blacked out or not, but the thing was that I was sort of on the side on my hands and knees and my eyes were closed and I didn't know if I was blind because I hadn't opened them, I suppose. And I remember hearing these cars, this was in practice, and I remember the cars going around and as they revved up and switched them on and the drivers all came up. And how are you and all this sort of thing. And I'm sort of like this, and then they'd bring the blood wagon up. And those are awful memories, you know, they really are frightening things. But when I put that on the equation, against the pleasures, the exhilaration isn't seeing the checkered flag, yes, that's there, but there's also exhilaration in looking in your mirror, and you see you've got some really hot guy behind, and you go around the corner in what you think's right, and you look in the mirror and he's dropped back a yard. You think, Christ, that'll show him. Now I'm going to really move. And it gives you an enormous flow of adrenaline that then allows you to hopefully pull away more. and all those things.
What was your reaction to the other side of the coin, where accidents are concerned, where at the Nürburgring one year in the 1,000 kilometres, you clipped that guy that you were lapping,
Yeah.
and he was killed. You know, he lost control and went off and was killed.
Yeah, well,
What was your reaction to that experience? Thinking, you know, did you think, you know, silly bugger, or did you think, you know, I wish that hadn't happened? Or?
Yes, of course, because he pulled across me going into the corner and so on, and I don't know if he knew I was there or not, but, and I don't know, was it Nürburg or was it Caracas? But anyway, whichever one it was. Certainly, if one's ever involved in an accident, it is it's a tremendous, you know, it's a traumatic time, and the only way you can carry the trauma of that is by sort of saying, well, Christ, I didn't do it. You know, I mean, if I'd gone along and I'd nudged him off or something like that, then I said...
If you'd been in the Farina position.
Yeah,
in fact.
exactly. I couldn't live with that. I mean, the other wasn't. And therefore, I mean, I can cope with it. I can cope with it, yes, I can rationalise it, yeah. Yeah.
What did you think when in 55 at Le Mans, when you were driving with Fangio and the Mercedes and the team pulled out after the accident in which 80 people were killed?
The trauma of the occasion was enormous. I mean, obviously, because one could see that there was tremendous troubles happening there. When we were pulled out, it was quite a lot later, and I personally didn't see that pulling out was going to in any way lessen the accident. And I was personally not for it, because obviously I happen to be leading with Fangio, which is fairly important. But also I felt, well, if you do, there are going to be people who are going to say, well, you did it because you felt guilty. I mean, it was the most awful thing that's ever happened in motor racing, but I don't think to stop the race would have been any good, and I don't think that Mercedes pulling out would have been any benefit, actually.
Going back to accidents and third-party accidents, it struck me that at the time there were a lot of drivers killed, glibly written about. For example, the Musso accident, they just say, you know, trying very hard and tragically killed.
In over his head.
I mean, at the time, did you try and analyse exactly what the guy had done wrong and what happened? I mean, and Collins is another example. I mean, how did those accidents themselves...
But they were, I think.
They were
cases.
I know they
were just trying
I know,
too
but
hard.
in what way did they do something wrong? What were they doing? Did he just lose the back end and overcorrect? Did he brake too late? What was it?
Well, I mean, the point was it was a driver error.
Yes, I understand that.
Well, when there's a driver error, to be able to give yourself confidence, and remember, racing is confidence, and the greatest sign of confidence I've ever seen was Michael Schumacher in the Spanish Grand Prix, when there were cars going round at this corner, keeping on the inside as people normally do. And because anybody who's watching this knows that the bigger the radius, the faster you can go, all things being equal. And yet the cars were relatively inside. Michael Schumacher comes down on the outside and just goes round like that around the outside, which is obviously quicker. But who has the confidence to be able to go under those conditions, right on the edge of disaster, as you're saying,
yes, with no
and know they're
margin.
going to get away? Exactly. And that is what, as a racing driver, you need. I can remember, not long after Will had come off, driving my car in Portugal, and the tree-lined curve, very fast curve, doing 110. And I thought, God, if a wheel comes off now, I am in big trouble. And you can't think like that. And I remember sort of saying, you know, forget it. You've just got to think what you're doing and concentrate. So one has to, in motor racing, above anything else, you've got to be able to concentrate. And you must be able to control your mind to concentrate on the right thing. Otherwise, you see a nice bit of crumpet and you think about it too long, you know. So it's all right to give a wave, but no more. And I think this is one of the necessary makeups of a driver, is a man who can control himself.
That accident in 1960 at Spa, when your wheel came off, and you broke your back and both your legs. What did that do for your confidence in the man who'd built the car?
Well, not much, but it wasn't the first time.
But you carried on racing.
Yes, I did.
You see, Stirling, to me, that's the most remarkable thing. It's one thing being able to say, okay, the circuits were thoroughly unsafe, but they were classic circuits and we accepted them and everything else. That's one thing. It's the fact that you were driving those circuits in cars that were likely to break. I mean, you're not making a mistake is one thing, but driving a fragile car in a circuit like that, that's how it surprises me safety never came up.
I agree with you, and if I was logical and not a bit crazy, I wouldn't have gone on for that. But I I don't know, for some reason, I suppose because it makes me feel better, I believe in God, and I believe that God's not going to let me die unless it's my fault. Which is stupid, if you like, but the point is, it's one way that I can accept it, that I don't deserve to die because Colin Chapman's wheel falls off. I really don't.
No.
And there's no logical reason, but I've got to be able to carry on with what I want to do, so I'm looking for every excuse I can get to allow me to carry on without being scared out of it or something.
In Maserati, you went to Van Wall in 57 and 58, and although that was the period in which British constructors were starting to become successful, in a way Van Wall seems, in retrospect, more like a throwback to older teams. It wasn't like Cooper and Lotus, which were sort of special builders, weren't they? Van Wall seems more substantial. It must have been a bit more like being at Mercedes, I would have thought.
Yeah, well, that car was a super-looking car. I mean, no two ways about it. It was not a nice car to drive, but because it was successful and won the World Championship, one has to sort of say it did what it had to do. Most importantly to Van der Velde, of course, it beat Ferrari, which is the one thing he wanted to do. It was a crusade. He had a very strong team. I mean, Tony Brooks, tremendously fast driver, and Stuart Lewis-Evans as well. Stuart Lewis-Evans wasn't very robust, but my God, he was quick. No two ways about it. The Van Wall had a very difficult gearbox. The engine was good. The aerodynamics were exceptionally good. The brakes were good. But driving it was not like a Maserati 250F. Was a really nice car. You felt you got in the rhythm with it. You never quite got in that rhythm with the Van Wall, or I didn't.
But in 58 it was extremely dominant, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. I mean it was the car, I think, actually.
Yeah. But he won the Constructors' Championship that year, narrowly missed the Drivers' Championship for you, and then Van der Velde knocked it on the head, which seems now an extraordinary thing to have
Do you
done.
think, had it not been for Lewis Evans' accident at Casablanca, was it that determined Van der Velde's?
I don't think it was. I think that certainly was very saddening to the team, but I don't think so. I think Van der Velde had achieved what he was after. He had beaten Ferrari, the mighty Ferrari, got the title from him, and I think the Drivers' Championship, which I just missed and so on, I don't think was that important. I think it was what he wanted to do, and I think he'd done it. And then obviously Stuart Lewis-Evans' accident was probably helpful to make him retire, but I don't think really that was it, though, entirely.
What was he like to work for, and to drive for?
Frustrating, because he'd get in the car and warm it up and pucker up the clutch.
My car, I can do what I like.
Well, that's exactly. He was frustrating, and Marion Moore, who was his lady, who was great the way she used to placate us and so on, but...
So it was nothing like driving for Mercedes then?
Oh,
it was
no,
a complete contrast.
But you see, Stirling, and something else that strikes me is that it was after the final race in 58 that Van der Velde announced he was stopping. So there's you and there's Brooks. And we think now the silly season in Grand Prix racing, which seems to start in about May, when people are pitching drivers for the following season. And here you are. I mean, you were probably the two best drivers. In fact, you were the two best drivers in the world, I would have said, wouldn't you?
Hawthorne had retired.
And here you are, and it's season's end, and it's sort of, well, now what are we going to do now? And I mean, in the end, you went off to Rob Walker, and Tony went off to Ferrari. But it's just interesting that you hadn't been sort of chivying Van der Velde earlier in the season, sort of saying,
Van der Velde was not the
59,
sort of man
are we
you
going on? Or
No, but you wouldn't chivvy Van der Velde.
No, but
would you chivvy Ferrari? You know what I mean?
But wouldn't it? Perhaps it wouldn't have worried him if you'd said, look, what's happening in 59. Just sort of, it wouldn't have gone through his head. Geez, I wonder if Ferrari are going to try and poach him, or
no, I don't.
He wouldn't have given you an answer.
I don't think so.
No.
Did Ferrari make you an offer every year of your career?
No, Ferrari made me an offer early on, which was bought in with one in Bari. And then ultimately he made me an offer at the end of 1961. I went to see him, and his cars were not doing that well. And he said, listen, if you tell me what, at least they were doing well, but I had managed to beat them in the two races. If you tell me what car you want, I'll build it for you. If you'll drive for me. And I said, I'd spoken to Fangio, and I said, what do you reckon? This was before. And he said, well, drive for him, but don't sign. So anyway, I said to Enzo, I said, listen, I'd be delighted to drive your car, provided it can be in Rob Walker Bloom, and Rob runs it. So how it logistically would have worked out, I don't honestly know, but we agreed,
He agreed to that?
He agreed to that. Oh, in fact, he built the car, and I think in this island actually drove it.
Yeah, he did.
He did, didn't he? Yeah. Then, of course, I had the big shunt at the beginning of 62, and so it didn't work. But I was going to drive a Ferrari under Rob Walker colours, and that was...
What had changed in your mind by then? What had caused you to forgive the...
Well,
falling out all those years
he took
before?
me out there and we sort of kissed on each cheek, and I thought, well, it's a long time ago when he screwed me up, and now he seems to want me, and it is a terrific car, and I have a great respect for Ferrari. Remember, I can't think of any driver who ever died because of Ferrari's failure on a part.
Yeah.
Engines may break and all that sort of thing, but I can't think of any mechanical failure. And that when you've been driving cars that weren't that solid, other than obviously Mercedes and Cooper pretty good, it does make you respect a person like that. And I think he's done more for motor racing as a person than anybody else in the world, probably, because the scream of a Ferrari and the colour, and my whole upbringing has been listening to those damn things going around 24 hours and they're still going at the end, and these sort of things. And I had driven, obviously, I'd driven privately for Ferrari on about 12 occasions or so.
Sports and GT cars,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I've done
Yeah.
done very, very well with the things. And so I thought, well, when he called me out there and he bought me a meal and everything, and he came out to see me as soon as I got there, which was unusual, I can tell you. It seemed that, you know, if Rob Walker could run it for me, he's the man that I race for, this was what I wanted. And I think the cars, I know I was going to have a reliable car, a fast car, well run with friends, and it seemed a good idea.
I suppose something else that would have been different too was that where Chapman would never sell Rob the latest Lotus, because it was going to, it might, if you were beating Jimmy or whatever, he wouldn't have liked that. But Enzo would have revelled in it, wouldn't he? If you've been beating his drivers.
Oh, he would have, oh yes, absolutely.
He would have absolutely made hay with that.
Well, you see, we'd had trouble from both Cooper as well, because John would sell us the car, but he wouldn't let us have the gearbox. So we were forced to go to Gallotti, who did a fantastic gearbox, which unfortunately wasn't very strong, because of the materials. And then I got the name during my career of being a car breaker. Sure. Which I really don't think I was, but this was partly to do with that, and which was something that I must admit did hurt me. I was very worried about it, because I know, with the knowledge of hindsight, it's easy to know why I did it. And the thing was that I would, because we didn't have a factory engine, I would only rev mine to about 6,500 and change gear, which of course was putting more strain on the gearbox, because bigger torque. I didn't know that. If I had, I'd have revved higher and been okay. But I got the blame for it, which I thought was unfair. And so to go to Ferrari would have been good.
I think you're sort of saddled with the whole Gallotti gearbox saga is regarded as, is always used as an example of Moss, the car breaker.
Yes, yes. Always changing his car.
But also that, no, we can't have the standard gearbox, we've got to have something better.
From Vanwall, you went to Cooper then, and was that the greatest sort of family feeling you had, because you had Rob?
That's the point.
Yeah,
Yes.
but private Cooper, yeah.
Yes, but what I was saying was you had, on the one hand, you had Rob as a sort of family, very private, lovely operation, and at the same time John Cooper, who you had a good relationship with, who was easy to get on with and easy to talk to, I guess. And so for you, was it one of the most melodic times of your career?
Yes, being with Rob certainly was, because Rob Walker he's a true amateur entrant, if you like. I mean, he'd have what we used to kid him about his water-cooled stopwatches. You know, he'd have a watch that start this one and that would stop that one, and all this sort of thing, and he'd write it down most precisely, almost with a quill pen. I mean, that's the way he is. And he's the sort of guy, if I'd say to him, look, what about a race, they called me up, a race in Holland or Denmark, I mean, well, yes, Stirling, all right, speak to Alf. And I'd go and speak to Alf, the mechanic, and he said, great, we'll go over there. And that's how it worked, and it was a wonderful...
But what was your relationship with the factory team, though? How did you work with John Cooper?
Oh, I didn't have to work with them.
But did you have any interface with them at all?
No, none at all. They sold us the chassis, and we then went to Coventry Climax and got the engine. We had to get the Gallotti gearbox, and that was it. So we were no closer, really, with John Cooper than with Colin, except that John Cooper was a much more amenable person to sort of talk to, and he's a lot of fun and that sort of thing. So,
and he just loved having you driving a car with his name on it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, he was a very... we got a very warm relationship, but it wasn't any more than that.
But your Walker Coopers were considerably different to the Works Coopers.
Well, that was thanks to two people, really, to Alf on my side, and I
Jack,
suppose Jack on the other side.
Jack on the other side, yeah.
It's two ways around the problem,
and Jack was working with Ron Toronak, who was down in Australia, saying, why don't you try doing this? And then Jack saying to John Cooper, I think we ought to try this. And John Cooper saying, OK, Jack, don't mention it to the old man. I'll find the money for it. And they'd go away and do things like buying ZF limited slip diffs and so on, without telling Charlie Cooper, because if Charlie Cooper found that it cost £47.10 for a ZF diff, he would go absolutely apeshit.
But was there a certain kind of perverse satisfaction in those years in turning up for a Grand Prix with a private team, with what was essentially obsolete equipment?
Yes.
And racing against the factory teams
Yes.
and trying to beat them?
Yes, because to be able to take a car that was last year's and to beat the factory gave me great pleasure. I mean, in other words, why'd you bother building a new one? The last one was good enough. That's the sort of attitude.
I bet
yes.
Chapman absolutely
But
adored that.
Do you think now that cost you a championship or two?
Oh, I'm sure it
possibly
did.
three?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I don't think that I conducted my racing career as well as it could have been conducted if, to me, the most important thing was achieving a title. Certainly, I didn't. There were better decisions, and financially there were better decisions. I mean, Rob Walker and I had no agreement with, not even an exchange of letters about my driving for him. But I mean, I would certainly drive for him, and he would not think of speaking to me about things. And so the relationship was a very warm one and a very personal one. And that, to me, is what made motor racing, that part of my career, which was very, I mean, with quite a lot of racing, quite tough pressure then, too. Pressure from the press as well. And the responsibility to one's sport and to what you're doing, all those pressures were made easier for me racing for Rob. Racing to me was Rob Walker as much as anything else. I mean, or I did race for other people, of course I did, I'd go to other races, but...
And Alf's preparation. Alf Francis' preparation of the car.
So you imagine you would have stayed with Rob for as long as you'd been?
Yes, as long as Rob wanted to continue and racing was feasible, yes. I mean, I had every hope and belief that I was going to be racing another 10 or 15 years.
Sure.
But I was interested here earlier, Nigel, you said that Stirling has always felt that Monaco 61 was your greatest race, is that right?
Certainly of that type, yes. Yes.
So if you think now, if you just had to have a quick rewind of your career, that's the race that would immediately come to mind more than any other?
I had the whole final lap when I realised I'd won and going around, and I tell you, it's unbelievable. To me, it was unbelievable to stand up and hear God Save the Queen played, because I was very patriotic, which was a word that doesn't seem to be around too much today, but to me, racing an English car in Rob Walker blue, which was like a funny colour of green, if you know what I mean, it was a big moment, a very big moment, yeah, very much so.
Because it's a great name, Stirling Moss. I mean, it just rolls
It's better
off
than
the tongue.
Hamish. That was my housekeeper's dog's name. Actually.
That was your mother's idea, wasn't it, Hamish?
My mother suggested Hamish. My father said, I don't like it. He said, think again. And thank God Mum came up with Stirling because of her connection. My mother being a Scot, I mean, her name was Crawford, C-R-A-U-F-U-R-D. And so she said, what about Stirling? My father thought, well, it doesn't sound homosexual. It doesn't sound too this way or that. And I think he said, all right, we'll take that one.